Okay, we're talking today with Professor Tapen Sinha and Professor Karandikar. Tell us something about the origin of multiple choice methods.
Okay, these multiple choice methods originated back in the 1860s with Helmholtz in Germany, and it was originally designed for things other than measuring intelligence per se, but the Germans were very interested in measuring intelligence, so it moved on to the US, and meanwhile in France, Alfred Binet was developing this method for measuring deficiency in groups of young people so that he could design to make up their deficiency. In other words, it was designed for helping people who had problems of mental development and so on. So it was not meant for general population measurement of intelligence of so-called normal people. And it was brought to the US by several psychologists who went and either studied under Binet or they brought it along by reading some of the stuff that Binet had been writing about, especially Tapen, and he turned his gun towards measuring people's deficiency using these sorts of methods. So for example, he argued with the idea of how you define a moron. So he used this method to actually define what a moronic person is in terms of how much depending on how much they scored on these tests. And then it was applied to letting people into the armed forces, especially in the army in the United States. So basically, if you scored low, you got classified as a soldier, in other words, a cannon fodder. But if you got high score, then you became an officer, and then your chances of survival improved substantially. And they used that on millions and millions of people, so there are untold number of people who got killed as a consequence of how much they scored on these supposedly standardized tests.
So what are the modern scoring methods?
Yeah, the whole modern scoring method started with Thurston, who was a psychologist. He was a statistician as well. And what he did was he devised this method so that it became a standardized test. So for example, if there are, in a multiple choice question, there are 4 options, then he said, okay, in order so that somebody who is guessing does not end up scoring a lot of numbers, he said we will assign them 1/3 negative mark if there's an incorrect answer and 1 mark for a correct answer. And that was really the beginning of the modern scoring method. Then the modern scoring method went on to be used for other kinds of tests, for example, for college admissions, and for example, SAT tests are these standard methods, basically what was designed originally by Thurston. And pretty much the same method is being used today. So that is what we mean by using modern methods in multiple choice scores.
Okay, are there problems with these scoring methods?
Yes, especially if it is used for selection or not selection, like an admission test. So what happens is, what Tapen said about minus 1/3 for a wrong answer, that is based on the premise that if somebody answers all the questions randomly, the expected score is 0. Or to put it differently, randomized guessing will not give anybody an advantage on the average. Now, this is where the problem starts. Suppose we have some 100,000 candidates taking the test, and we are picking up the top 1,000. Now, it may happen that somebody who is actually not in top 1,000, say around 1,100, but he gets lucky when he guesses some of the answers and he gets it in. Now, it doesn't help us at all if somebody who is 5,000 in the rank, he gets less than what his scores were. So minus 1/3 ensures that on the average nobody gains, but it doesn't ensure that people who should not have come into our selection list are getting in. So that is a problem. Now, how much this occurs, that's another question.
Well, we're not going to ask that question, but how do you fix it?
One way of fixing it is to increase the number of alternatives. So instead of 4 alternatives, make it 6, make it 8, make it 10. The more alternatives you make, correspondingly there will be in 10 alternatives the negative score will be minus 1/9, and that will be better than 4 alternatives at minus 1/3. Having said that, I must add that making a test with 10 credible answers is nearly impossible. I have made tests and making even 4 answers which are out of which 1 is correct and 3 are not correct and credible is difficult. So preferred method is the following. You move away from exactly 1 correct answer scenario to multiple correct answer scenarios. So there are 4 options. All 4 could be correct, some 3 could be correct, 2 could be correct, or 1 could be correct. And a candidate is asked to tick all the correct options and no incorrect option. Only then the candidate gets a positive score. With this, even if we don't give any negative scores and no partial credits, this reasonably reduces significantly the effect of randomized guessing. So that is a recommended option, and we have tried it with some tests, and based on our assessment, it has been a successful experiment.
Thank you, professors. That was very informative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.
Okay.